The sound of rolling suitcases and tired conversations filled the airport as Alexandra Thomas stood waiting at the luggage carousel. Her shoulders ached from the 5-hour flight, but her mind was still buzzing with ideas from the public policy conference she'd attended. At 27, she was the youngest person her hometown of Pine Ridge had ever sent to represent them at a national level. Alexandra checked her watch and sighed. It was almost midnight, and all she wanted was to grab her bag and head home for a hot shower. Her dark blue blazer and pencil skirt, so professional during her presentation earlier that day, now felt stiff and uncomfortable. Finally, she whispered as she spotted her burgundy suitcase coming around the bend. As she reached for it, a firm hand gripped her shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need to ask you some questions about that bag." Alexandra turned to see 2 airport police officers standing behind her. The taller one, whose name badge read Officer Wilson, looked at her with cold eyes while his partner stood slightly back. "Of course, officers. This is my luggage. Is there a problem?" Alexandra asked politely, still holding her carry-on bag in one hand. Officer Wilson looked her up and down slowly. "That's a pretty fancy suitcase. Louis Vuitton, right? Seems a bit expensive." Alexandra blinked in confusion. "It was a graduation gift from my parents." "I don't understand." "And where exactly are you coming from?" The second officer cut in. "Washington, D.C. I was at the National Public Policy Forum representing Pine Ridge." The officers exchanged looks, and the shorter one smirked. "Right, you don't really look like the public policy type." Heat rose to Alexandra's cheeks as she realized what was happening. She'd heard stories from friends about this kind of treatment, but experiencing it firsthand made her stomach twist. "I have my conference badge and materials right here," she said, reaching carefully into her purse. "And my ID." "Don't reach into your bag." Officer Wilson barked, causing nearby travelers to turn and stare. "Hands where I can see them." Alexandra slowly raised her hands, her heart pounding. "I'm just getting my identification as you requested. Everything is in order, I assure you." "Sure it is," Wilson muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Just like all you people's papers are in order until we check them." The comment stung like a slap. Alexandra took a deep breath, determined to stay calm. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job, but I believe I'm being profiled right now. May I please see your badge numbers?" The atmosphere changed instantly. Officer Wilson stepped closer, towering over her. "Are you refusing to comply with airport security? Because that's what it sounds like to me." "No, sir. I'm simply asking for your badge numbers, which is my right as a citizen." "We've got an expert on rights here," the second officer said with a laugh. "Probably learned that from one of those troublemaker websites." Before Alexandra could respond, she felt cold metal against her wrists. Officer Wilson was handcuffing her. "What are you doing?" "I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice rose in disbelief as people began to stare openly now, some even recording with their phones. "You're being detained for interfering with security procedures and demonstrating hostile behavior," Wilson announced loudly, as if performing for the growing audience. Alexandra's legs felt weak as they led her away from the carousel, a suitcase left behind. "I need to make a phone call. I have rights," she insisted, trying to keep the shake out of her voice. "You'll get your phone call when we decide you get it," the shorter officer replied. "Maybe this will teach you some respect." As they marched her through the terminal, Alexandra held her head high despite the humiliation burning through her. What these officers didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed from their biased assumptions, was exactly who they were treating like a common criminal. And soon enough, they would find out. The holding room at the airport police station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Alexandra sat on a hard plastic chair, her wrists still red from where the handcuffs had dug into her skin. Despite the churning in her stomach, she kept her back straight and her expression calm. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Officer Wilson stood by the desk, filling out paperwork while his partner leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone. They thought she couldn't hear them, but their voices carried clearly across the small room. "Another one thinking she's special," the shorter officer said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Bet she's never even been to a real job interview, let alone some fancy government conference." Officer Wilson snorted. "Yeah, probably lives in Riverside Heights." He said the name of the predominantly black neighborhood like it was something dirty. Alexandra bit her tongue. Her family had indeed lived in Riverside Heights when she was young, before her father's career in local politics had taken off. These officers had no idea who they were dealing with, and that was exactly the problem. No one deserved this kind of treatment, regardless of who their parents were. "When do I get my phone call?" she asked, her voice steady despite her anger. Officer Wilson glanced up from his paperwork. "When we're good and ready, Princess. This isn't a TV show." An hour passed before a third officer, a woman with tired eyes, finally led Alexandra to a phone mounted on the wall. 3 minutes, she said curtly. Alexandra's fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. She'd thought about calling her lawyer first, but something told her to go straight to the top. The phone rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "Hello? Who's calling at this hour?" "Dad." Alexandra said, relief washing over her at the sound of his voice. "I'm at the airport police station. 2 officers detained me when I was getting my luggage." "What?" "Are you okay? What happened?" Her father's voice sharpened with concern. "I'm fine physically, but they handcuffed me in front of everyone for absolutely no reason. They've been making comments about where I live, how I dress. It's been awful." Put an officer on the phone. Now, the authority in his voice was unmistakable. Officer Wilson, who had been hovering nearby, clearly eavesdropping, smirked and moved closer. "Dad, I'm going to miss our breakfast with the governor tomorrow. Can you let his office know?" The officer's expression changed, his smirk faltering. "Governor?" He interrupted, suddenly more alert. Alexandra ignored him. "Yes, Dad. I know how important that meeting is for the city budget, but—" Officer Wilson's hand reached for the phone. "Let me talk to him." Alexandra stepped back. "My father wants to speak with whoever's in charge here." "Give me the phone," Wilson demanded, his tone less confident now. Alexandra reluctantly handed it over, watching as the officer put on what she assumed was his professional voice. "This is Officer Wilson, Airport Police. Who am I speaking with?" Even from where she stood, Alexandra could hear her father's booming voice. "This is Mayor Thomas. You have my daughter in custody, and I want to know why right now." The color drained from Officer Wilson's face. His partner, seeing the change, hurried over. "What's going on?" The shorter officer whispered. Wilson covered the mouthpiece. "It's the mayor," he hissed. "She's the mayor's daughter." The second officer's eyes widened as he looked at Alexandra with new understanding. "Sir, there seems to have been a misunderstanding," Wilson stammered into the phone. "We had reports of suspicious activity and your daughter matched a description." Alexandra could hear her father cutting him off, his words too fast and furious to make out from where she stood. The officer in charge, a Captain Lai, suddenly appeared, summoned by an urgent text from Wilson. He took the phone, listened for a moment, and then looked at Alexandra with a completely different expression than she'd seen on any officer's face since she'd been brought in. "Mayor Thomas, I deeply apologize for this situation. I'll personally look into what happened here tonight." As the captain spoke, the 2 officers who had arrested her backed away, suddenly finding urgent paperwork that needed their attention across the room. The truth was out now, and Alexandra knew that what happened next would reach far beyond this small holding room. Within 30 minutes, the airport police station transformed completely. The sleepy night shift suddenly buzzed with activity as officers who had been dozing at their desks straightened their uniforms and cleared coffee cups. Captain Lai had made at least a dozen phone calls, his voice growing increasingly apologetic with each one. Alexandra sat quietly, watching it all unfold. She had refused the comfortable office they'd offered her after discovering her identity. Instead, she remained in the same plastic chair in the holding area where other detainees sat. A young man with dreadlocks nodded at her in silent solidarity. "Ms. Thomas, your release paperwork is ready," a nervous desk sergeant announced, holding a clipboard. "We just need your signature, and you're free to go." Alexandra took the clipboard but didn't sign right away. "What about everyone else who was brought in tonight? How long will they wait?" The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that depends on their individual situations. So I'm getting special treatment now?" Alexandra asked, her voice carrying across the room. "Because of who my father is?" Before the sergeant could answer, the main doors swung open. Police Chief Rodriguez entered, followed by the airport director and finally her father. Mayor Thomas looked nothing like the polished politician Alexandra was used to seeing on local news. His tie was missing, his collar unbuttoned, and worry lines creased his forehead. "Alexandra." He rushed forward, embracing her tightly. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered, though she allowed herself to lean into his strength for just a moment. Chief Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mayor Thomas, Ms. Thomas, on behalf of the department, I want to extend our deepest apologies for this incident. The officers involved have been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." Alexandra gently pulled away from her father's embrace. "Chief Rodriguez, I appreciate that. But I don't want special treatment because of who my father is. What happened to me tonight happens to people in our city every day." The young man with dreadlocks nodded again, more visibly this time. "My daughter is right," Mayor Thomas said, his voice carrying the authority that had won him 3 elections. "This isn't about her being the mayor's daughter. This is about citizens being treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like." The airport director stepped forward. "We've already retrieved your luggage, Ms. Thomas, and we've arranged for a private exit to avoid the press." Outside, despite the late hour and supposed private exit, a small crowd of reporters had gathered. Someone had tipped them off. Camera lights flashed as Alexandra and her father emerged. "Mayor Thomas, can you comment on your daughter's detention? Ms. Thomas, were you racially profiled? Will you be suing the department mayor?" Mayor Thomas raised his hand for silence, but to everyone's surprise, Alexandra stepped forward. "I'd like to make a statement," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The reporters fell quiet, cameras focused on her. "What happened to me tonight was wrong. I was profiled, mocked, and detained without cause. The officers who arrested me made assumptions based on how I look." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But this isn't just about me. I'm standing here right now, free to go home, because my father is the mayor. How many people are still sitting in that holding room because they don't have someone with influence to call?" Her father placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "I don't want Officers Wilson and Taylor fired," Alexandra continued, surprising even her father. "What I want is accountability and change. I want training that addresses the biases we all carry. I want systems that protect everyone's dignity, not just those with connections." A reporter called out, "Will you be pressing charges?" Alexandra looked directly into the nearest camera. "I'll be working with my father and city officials to press for change. Real, lasting change. That's the justice I'm seeking." As they walked to their car, her father squeezed her shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," he said quietly. "But this isn't over, is it?" Alexandra shook her head. "No, Dad, it's just beginning." The internal affairs investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, both Officer Wilson and Officer Taylor sat in separate rooms at police headquarters, watching their careers crumble around them. Wilson stared at the laptop screen in front of him, his face growing paler with each passing minute. The body camera footage contradicted almost everything in his written report. There was Alexandra, calmly reaching for her ID. There was his voice, making comments about her kind that sounded even worse when played back in the silent conference room. "Stop the video," said Lieutenant Chen, who was leading the investigation. "Officer Wilson, would you like to revise your statement about Ms. Thomas being aggressive?" Wilson loosened his collar. "I may have misremembered certain details." Across the building, Officer Taylor wasn't doing much better. His 20 years on the force were flashing before his eyes as he calculated how much his pension would be worth if he was fired before retirement. "I was just following Wilson's lead," he explained to the internal affairs officer. "He's the senior officer." "So you didn't make any inappropriate comments yourself?" the investigator asked, sliding a transcript across the table. Taylor read his own words and winced. "I didn't realize how it sounded at the time." Meanwhile, in the department break room, other officers watched the local news coverage of the incident. The footage someone had recorded on their phone at the airport had gone viral, with over 2 million views across social media platforms. "They're finished," said one officer, shaking her head, "and they might take the whole precinct down with them." Another officer, a veteran who had trained many rookies, sighed heavily. "This isn't the first time Wilson's done something like this. Remember that traffic stop last year? The basketball coach. Yeah, but nothing happened then. Because the coach didn't have connections. Now Wilson's picked on the wrong person, and we're all going to pay for it. At home, Officer Wilson's wife packed a suitcase. Their neighbors had already stopped speaking to them, and someone had spray-painted racist on their garage door overnight. Their 16-year-old daughter had come home in tears, showing them social media posts where her classmates were sharing the video and tagging her in comments. Maybe we should stay with my sister for a while, his wife suggested, not meeting his eyes. Wilson nodded silently. How had it come to this? In his mind, he'd just been doing his job, looking for suspicious activity. He'd always prided himself on his instincts. Now those same instincts had destroyed his life. Officer Taylor sat alone in his apartment, staring at the retirement brooches he'd been collecting. At 52, he was just 3 years away from his full pension. He thought about all the times he'd gone along with comments and actions he knew weren't right, telling himself it was just part of police culture, that it didn't really hurt anyone. His phone rang. It was his daughter calling from college. Dad, is that you in that airport video? Please tell me it's not. Taylor closed his eyes. Honey, it's complicated. No, Dad, it's not complicated. What you did was wrong. I'm studying criminal justice because of you, because I believed in what you do. How am I supposed to feel now? The question hung in the air without an answer. Back at police headquarters, Chief Rodriguez called an emergency meeting of all precinct captains. This isn't just about 2 officers anymore, he told them, his expression grim. We've received dozens of complaints from people claiming similar treatment. Civil rights groups are calling for a department-wide investigation. The Justice Department has contacted the mayor's office. Captain Lay from the airport precinct spoke up. What about sensitivity training? We called. We're well past sensitivity training, the chief interrupted. This is about accountability now. Every officer with a history of complaints is going to be reviewed. Every precinct's arrest records will be analyzed for racial patterns. He looked around the room at the uncomfortable faces. What happened to Mayor Thomas's daughter has forced us to confront something we've been avoiding for too long. And it's going to change this department forever. The city council chamber had never been so packed. People stood along the walls, sat in the aisles, and spilled out into the hallway. Signs reading "Justice for Alexandra" and "Police Reform Now" bobbed above the crowd. Mayor Thomas sat at the center of the council table, looking both proud and troubled as he called the emergency meeting to order. I speak to you today not just as your mayor, but as a father, he began, his voice thick with emotion. What happened to my daughter could have happened to anyone's child, and that's exactly why I've called this meeting. In the front row, Alexandra sat quietly. She wore a simple blue dress and had pulled her hair back, but there was no hiding from the frequent glances and whispers. Her story had made national news, and everyone in town recognized her now. Due to my personal connection to this case, I am recusing myself from direct oversight of the police department's internal investigation, Mayor Thomas continued. Deputy Mayor Rivera will lead that effort, with additional oversight from an independent committee we are forming today. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was unexpected. Politicians rarely gave up power voluntarily. Alexandra watched her father with new respect. For years, she'd seen him navigate political waters, making compromises and careful calculations. Today, there was no calculation in his eyes, only conviction. Councilwoman Patel, who had often opposed the mayor's policies, stood up. While I appreciate the gesture, Mr. Mayor, many of us have been calling for police reform for years. It shouldn't take your daughter being mistreated for action to be taken. The crowd erupted in both cheers and protests. Mayor Thomas raised his hand for quiet. Councilwoman, you're absolutely right. I've been too slow to act on these issues, and I take full responsibility for that. I'm asking for your help now to make meaningful changes, not just symbolic ones. After the meeting, Alexandra declined interview requests from CNN and other national networks. Instead, she sat in a church basement with community organizers who had been working on police reform long before her incident. I'm here to listen and learn, she told them. This happened to me once. Many of you have experienced this kind of treatment your entire lives. An older woman with silver hair spoke up. Child, what happened to you was wrong. But you have a platform now that many of us don't have. How will you use it? Alexandra nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly why I'm here. I don't want to be just a headline or a viral video. I want to be part of creating real change. Across town, at the police union headquarters, a different conversation was taking place. Union President Donahue pounded his fist on the table. This is a witch hunt. They're using this one incident to attack the entire department. We can't stand for it. The room was divided. Some officers nodded vigorously, while others looked uncomfortable. A younger officer spoke up hesitantly. But the video evidence is pretty clear. Wilson and Taylor crossed a line. So we throw them under the bus? Donahue challenged. Today it's them. Tomorrow it could be any of us just for doing our jobs. Our job isn't to humiliate people based on how they look, another officer countered. And if that's what some of us think policing is, then maybe we do need this wake-up call. Back at City Hall, Alexandra met with Deputy Mayor Rivera. They sat in a small conference room away from the press and cameras. We're establishing a civilian oversight committee, Rivera explained. Would you consider being part of it? Alexandra looked surprised. I'm not sure that's appropriate. I'm personally involved in this case. Exactly, Rivera nodded. You've experienced the problem firsthand, you'd have relevant professional expertise from your policy work, and you've shown remarkable balance in how you've handled this. You haven't called for firing the officers. You've asked for accountability and change. That's the perspective we need. Alexandra considered the offer. Her conference presentation seemed like a lifetime ago, but the policy recommendations she'd made there about community policing suddenly felt urgently relevant. I need to think about it, she said finally. This isn't just my story anymore. It belongs to the city now, and I want to make sure I'm helping, not just taking up space that should go to people who've been doing this work for years. Rivera smiled. That answer is exactly why I asked you. The city attorney's office was unusually quiet as Alexandra sat across from a table of lawyers. The lead attorney, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes, slid a document across the polished table. This is our settlement offer, she explained. $300,000 plus a formal apology from the department. In exchange, you agree not to pursue further legal action. Alexandra looked at the document but didn't touch it. Her own attorney, Diane Chen, sat beside her, watching carefully. That's a very generous offer, Diane said neutrally. One of the largest the city has ever made for a case with no physical injuries. The city attorney nodded. We want to resolve this quickly and fairly. Alexandra finally picked up the paper, scanning the dense legal language. And what about policy changes, training reforms, independent oversight? The city attorney's smile tightened slightly. That's a separate matter. This settlement addresses your personal damages only. Then I'm not interested, Alexandra said, sliding the paper back. I don't want money. I want change. Later, in Diane's office, her attorney tried to reason with her. Alexandra, I understand your principles, but this is a very good offer. Most clients would grab it immediately. I'm not most clients, Alexandra replied. And I have the luxury of turning it down. How many people who get mistreated by police can say no to $300,000? That's exactly why I have to say no. Diane leaned back in her chair. If we file a lawsuit, it becomes public. It will be a media circus. Aren't you ready for that level of scrutiny? They'll dig into your past, try to discredit you. Alexandra thought about it. If that's what it takes to force real reforms, yes. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit was filed. Not just against Officers Wilson and Taylor, but against the entire police department, the airport authority, and the city itself. The complaint detailed not just Alexandra's experience, but referenced 27 similar incidents over the past 5 years, cases where complaints had been dismissed or settled quietly with confidentiality agreements. The media coverage was immediate and intense. Alexandra's social media accounts were flooded with both support and harassment. Some called her a hero, others an opportunist. Someone leaked her phone number online, forcing her to change it after receiving hundreds of threatening messages. Maybe I should have taken the money, Alexandra admitted to her father one evening, sitting in his study. The familiar room, with its walls of books, had always been her safe place. Mayor Thomas shook his head. You're doing the right thing, even though it's the hard thing. I'm proud of you, but I worry about the toll it's taking. I'm okay, Dad, really. But the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. The city fought back hard at first. Their legal team filed motion after motion to dismiss parts of the case. They argued that Alexandra hadn't suffered any lasting harm, that the officers had reasonable suspicion that departmental policies were sound. During discovery, though, the tide began to turn. Internal emails revealed that airport police had been instructed to increase stops and searches of suspicious individuals, with training materials that showed concerning racial patterns. Body camera footage from other incidents matched the pattern in Alexandra's case. Most damaging of all, a former officer came forward with text messages showing that targeting people of color was sometimes treated as a joke among certain officers. 6 months into the legal battle, Alexandra sat in a mediation room with city representatives, including the new police chief who had replaced Rodriguez after he resigned under pressure. "We're prepared to offer a consent decree," the city's attorney announced. Mandatory body cameras with strict compliance monitoring, revised use of force policies, civilian oversight with real authority, regular audits of stop and search data for racial disparities, and comprehensive training reforms. Alexandra looked to Diane, who nodded slightly. This was what they had been fighting for. "And the officers?" Alexandra asked. "Officer Wilson has been terminated. Officer Taylor has accepted early retirement with a reduced pension. Both have agreed to participate in community reconciliation sessions as part of the settlement." Alexandra thought about the young man with dreadlocks who had nodded to her in the holding cell that night. She thought about the community organizers who had welcomed her into their meeting. She thought about all the people who had experienced what she had, but without the protection of a famous father. "I want it in writing," she said firmly. "Every detail with clear timelines and consequences for non-compliance. And I want it to be public. No confidentiality agreements." The new police chief nodded slowly. "That's fair." As they worked through the details, Alexandra felt a weight lifting. The lawsuit had been exhausting, painful at times, but necessary. This wasn't just about her night at the airport anymore. It was about changing a system that had been broken for too long. 1 year had passed since that night at the airport. Alexandra stood at the podium in the Police Academy auditorium, looking out at the sea of fresh young faces in blue uniforms. The newest class of police cadets watched her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "A year ago, I was handcuffed and humiliated for nothing more than the color of my skin," she began. No sugarcoating, no gentle introduction. "Today, I'm here to talk about what we've all learned since then and how we're building a better future together." In the front row, Chief Garcia nodded encouragingly. He had been appointed 6 months ago after a nationwide search for someone who could lead the department through its transformation. Behind him sat the academy trainers, including 2 community representatives who now participated in every aspect of cadet education. "The consent decree that resulted from my case isn't just a piece of paper," Alexandra continued. "It's a roadmap to a new kind of policing. You're the first class to go through the new training program, with its emphasis on community connection, bias recognition, and de-escalation skills." She gestured to a slide showing statistics. "Already we've seen complaints drop by 38%. Arrests are down, but successful prosecutions are up, meaning fewer people are being wrongfully detained. Public trust scores have improved in every neighborhood." A cadet raised her hand. "Ms. Thomas, do you hate the police now, after what happened to you?" Alexandra appreciated the direct question. "No, I don't. What I hate is a system that sometimes brings out the worst in good people. Officer Wilson sent me a letter last month. Would you like to hear what he wrote?" The room went completely silent as Alexandra pulled out a folded piece of paper. He wrote, "I've had a lot of time to think about that night. At first, I was angry at getting caught. Then I was angry at you for not taking the money and going away quietly. But eventually, I had to face the truth about myself and how I'd been doing my job. I'm sorry for how I treated you, and I'm even more sorry for all the people I treated that way when there were no cameras and no famous fathers to hold me accountable." Alexandra refolded the letter. "Officer Wilson is now working with our community reconciliation program. He meets with people who have experienced police misconduct and listens to their stories. He helps train officers on what bias looks like from the inside." Another cadet raised his hand. "What about Officer Taylor?" He took early retirement, but he's also found a way to contribute. He speaks to veteran officers around the country about the costs of staying silent when you see something wrong. His testimony was key to identifying other problem officers in our department. After the presentation, Alexandra walked through downtown with her father. Mayor Thomas was in his final year of office, having announced he wouldn't seek another term. "The advisory board wants you to consider running, he mentioned casually. For my seat." Alexandra laughed. "Dad, I'm 28. I don't have nearly enough experience. You have more than most. That policy fellowship, your work on the Oversight Committee, and now the National Police Reform Advocacy Network. Plus, you've shown you have the courage to stand up for what's right." They stopped at a small plaza that had recently been dedicated to community heroes. A new mural covered one wall, showing diverse faces of all ages, people who had fought for justice in their own ways. Alexandra was surprised to see her own face among them, painted alongside longtime activists and community leaders. "I still feel like I stumbled into this," she admitted. "So many people have been doing this work for decades." "Sometimes it takes a spark to light a fire," her father replied. "Your experience was that spark, but what you did afterward, that was your choice. You could have taken the money, done some TV interviews, and moved on. Instead, you built something lasting." As they continued walking, people nodded and waved. Some stopped to shake Alexandra's hand or share a quick story. A young woman about Alexandra's age approached with a small son. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "My brother was stopped by police last month. The officer turned on his body camera right away, explained why he was making the stop, and treated him with respect the whole time. That wouldn't have happened before." Later that evening, Alexandra sat in her apartment, looking through a scrapbook of news clippings and photos from the past year. There she was outside the police station that night. There was the protest march that followed, the signing of the consent decree, the first meeting of the Oversight Committee. Her phone buzzed with a message from Diane Chen. "Just heard from another department interested in adopting our training model. This makes 15 cities now. You started something big." Alexandra smiled and closed the scrapbook. When she'd been standing in that airport in handcuffs a year ago, she could never have imagined where the journey would lead. The pain and humiliation of that night had transformed into something powerful and positive, not just for her, but for an entire community. She wasn't the mayor's daughter anymore. She had become something entirely her own.